Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back, guys. We are back with more information about the Napoleon III apartments. And if you were listening last week, you know this is a continuing part 2 to these fascinating, beautiful part of the Louvre. And I'll let Claudine take it from here.
Yeah, so last week we talked about kind of the backstory on the creation of these rooms that were for the Ministry of State and then later Finance, the AKA Apartments of Napoleon III. But this week we're going to share some of the details on these gorgeous rooms. But you could also, it's sometimes with some of these, we're telling you about so many things that, visually you kind of want to see. When you get done listening to this, you could then, I'll put the link for my YouTube video I did in there, and I'm kind of showing you all of these details. And you could watch that or look on my website and I'll have a bunch of pictures, but if you can't make it back to Paris in the, in the meantime, you could watch the video too and see all of these great details.
Yeah, head over there, guys. Watch that video.
Yeah, so there's 2 types of rooms in these suite of apartments. There's the small private rooms that were for the minister and his wife, and then the over-the-top ceremonial rooms. And they're very different, but they all kind of go together. To get to these rooms, when you enter the Louvre, when you come in and you're underneath the pyramid, whether you come in at the pyramid and go down the escalator, which is actually the best way to do it, don't do the carousel entrance underground, which is what everybody online says to go to that one, because it's easier now, because everybody online said to go to that. It's an actual shit show. There is such a massive line at times at that one, and you sometimes will stand there for 20 minutes without moving. So use the pyramid, because the pyramid each way, when they separate it, either the top of the hour on the north side of the pyramid is the half hours on the south side. And so while they let whichever one is, there's 2 security entrances. So you're going through 2 scanners and you never stop. You just keep moving. And so you could get in there really quickly. So when you get down to the bottom of the escalator and you're standing underneath the pyramid, you want to go to the north side. So to the left, to the north side, which is the Richelieu wing. And we did an episode last year about how that Richelieu wing has only been a part of the Louvre for 30 years. But so after you go in there, you scan your ticket and then use the escalator to the right. Once you scan your ticket, take a right. Or you could use the elevator and go to the first floor. So once you get to the first floor, follow the signs west to the apartments and just past the little Angelina restaurant. Before racing in, take a peek inside of there, because that used to be the actual office of the Minister of State and Finance. Little remains of the original decor. The ceiling's been painted, but the view in there, basically, if you go to that little Angelina and you sit there in the window, you're looking right out at the pyramid. It's pretty fantastic. And sometimes it's just a great place just to go. If you've been in the museum for a while, you want to take a seat and go in there and get a coffee or hot chocolate, or they also have a very special dessert that they only have at the Angelina, and it's like chocolate and dark chocolate, and it looks like a little pyramid.
Super cute. Every time I try to go in there, it's always closed, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it opens a little bit later, so it opens at 10:30 in the morning, 11. And then it gets filled up pretty quickly. So it's, but it was closed for a while. There's another little cafe in the nicer months, Cafe Richelieu, that's there, and you actually go and sit outside, and you can sit there on the upper part of the first floor and look down the pyramid, and then you have the statues there and everything. I sometimes just go up there and pretend it's my office.
I think that you already have an office in the Louvre. I mean, you're there so much.
I know, I really should. I mean, I should just like maybe I could just take, one of the rooms in the Napoleon apartments, and that could just be I'd be more than happy to tell visitors about it as they come through.
Yeah, you should just set up your computer on the desk and see what
I
happens.
know. I don't think I'd get much work done because I'd overhear people giving the wrong information. And I'll be like, that's not correct.
It
No,
would drive me nuts.
it would drive me nuts. Yeah. So let's head into the rooms. And at first, you'll see how subdued these rooms are. When they were first installed, the staircase separated the bedroom and the bathroom from the boudoir and the family living room. But however, with each minister, just like kind of in the White House, how each president comes in and they get to redo the way the Oval Office works, they did kind of the same thing. So one minister would come in and he'd want it to look this way. Then the next one would come in and say, no, I want my bedrooms to be upstairs. And then the wife could go down onto the mezzanine or vice versa. So they changed quite a few times. I don't know exactly what we see today, where that ended, like which minister. I have not found that information. But it is very different. So when Lufel originally planned these rooms, he actually wanted them to have these very elaborate walls and painted ceilings. When they first were finished in 1859, after the minister's office in the Richelieu Pavilion, the fools move right in. Many people walk right through these rooms because they don't quite have that gold factor with all the gold gilding, but do stop and kind of look at them, especially look up at the ceilings. They have some of the ceilings, they're kind of just more painted with floral motifs and like vines. But the first room was a drawing room, and then it changed with each minister. And so this was essentially a drawing room, a family sitting room he wanted the first one, Achille wanted this huge bookshelf in the alcove. And so he assisted, they had that. The fireplace in that room is a copy of the Dauphin's bedroom at Versailles. And on either side, there's a bronze caryatide on the left and an atlas on the right. Anytime a caryatide is a column. And so instead of it just being a column like you see on a church, the column itself is actually the sculpture of a woman. And if it's a man, it's an atlas. And so usually they're holding up like the roof or they're doing something. The very famous ones are the ones in the Salle des Caryatides in the Louvre. But these were done in bronze by Charles Perrault, and they were gilded by a gentleman named Picard. But the ceiling is simple and has objects representing science, industry, and the arts in this really pretty kind of almost seafoam green color by an artist named Charles Chauvin. Right when you go through this room, then you enter the grand staircase, or the staircase of honor, as they were called. And Lufel basically was kind of the master of the staircases, and many of the staircases in the Louvre today, whether they were in the part of the Louvre from the 16th century or later, a lot of these were done and redone by him. So you have all of these great staircases, very much with the Napoleon III way of having, just like the streets of Paris, how you have these grand avenues with something triumphant sitting at the top of it, like the Opera House or the Pantheon, or Wing Victory. But he went through and changed a lot of those. But these ones this staircase is gorgeous. The sculptures that you will find in this part of the Louvre, specifically in these rooms, are original to that space. So some of them and some of the actual statues were commissioned by the ministers to be created, to be added there. So when in the 1990, when they signed all this area over to the Louvre, they signed over the entire contents of it as well. So the furniture, statues, art, everything then became property of the Louvre. And so that's why, luckily, it's still there.
They got the whole shebang.
Yeah, I got the whole shebang in there. But as I said last week, Lufel was very fond of cutting some corners, and he would pick material for the staircase, specifically that he would kind of try to not use the best materials he could. There's 6 doors, there's walnut doors, there's 6 doors in there. 2 of them aren't even like they don't actually open. But they're on 3 different levels because you have the ground floor, the mezzanine, and then the first floor that the apartment's on. They were designed with motifs of palms and flowers on the door, and they were then carved by 12 different artists. So those were actually done in actual walnut. But the railing and the light fixture was not iron, and the first design submitted was turned down by the architect, and he decided to design exactly what he wanted. The sculptor Moulin worked with him on the crown and the genie figures on the chandelier. It was originally glass, and it was electroplated by Charles Christophe. Instead of using cast iron for the decorative metalwork, electroplating and painting metal was used instead. And let me just tell you, I was like, what is electroplating? And so then I spent about 40 minutes of my day watching on YouTube how to electroplate, and it's quite fascinating.
You went down the electroplating dark web.
Well, it was like basically you take this like, glass, and so if you want to make something, you put like you put like water and salt, and then you put 2 strips of like, say, copper into the water and hanging over the edge, and then you attach a current to those. So you put 2 little, clamps on it, and then you plug it in, and you leave, and then you put a piece of like say a pencil across the top. This guy was doing this, and you have 2 pieces of metal. And so you tie those to this, and you hang it in there, and then you leave it in there in like 30 minutes. And then because of the current going through there, it basically, because you have copper in there already, it then electroplates that copper onto this other piece of metal. I think that was what I got out of it.
Wow, that's a lot. That's wild.
But kind of interesting, though. I was like, maybe I'll start a hobby, electroplating.
Seems like what you need in your life.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't have room for that. But it was quite interesting. But a few of my favorite things in here, the lamps on the south railing over the staircase are amazing. They're copper-plated Medici vases. They're topped with small dragons and have lion heads on it. And then on the east and west wall are 2 huge paintings by Charles-François Daubigny. He did a lot of the paintings in the apartments. And I remember when I first found these years ago, I was so excited because on the east is the Pavillon de Flore. The Pavillon de Flore was originally part of the Tuileries. It's the part of the Louvre now, and it's that southwestern farthest part of the Louvre that we actually don't go into. It's all offices. And then on the other side, on the other wall, there's one, and it's the palace and the garden of the Tuileries. And I remember years ago being so excited to see that because at that time, I had never really seen anything of the Tuileries. So that was very exciting. The palace itself was destroyed in 1871, and 10 years after these were painted. They were painted in 1861. After that, you walk through a smaller room that were, again, part of the personal apartments. There's beautiful fabric covering the walls with bouquets. This was the one-time boudoir of the wife. I just love that word. The ceiling is painted by the floral artist named Alex de Guecquier. Most of the decorations in the corners are a combination of painted floral garlands, swags, and golden scroll works. If you do go into this one, really look up at that because there really are beautiful. And honestly, I never see anybody stopping in these rooms. They just walk right through it without looking at anything. The next room is the first of the highly decorated rooms. It's different from all the others because it's very dark. Do you remember when your mom was here, I don't think these were open.
Yeah, I think that part was it was closed. The apartments were closed.
Yeah, I think I remember you asking me, and I think, but so you probably saw these quite a long time ago, huh?
It was not that long ago, but yeah, it was a minute. It was last year.
Yeah, last year.
My cousin came, we were able to
But you'll probably remember this room. So this is the large antechamber. It is covered in wax walnut on the walls. It was all carved by Nelly. There's no first name. Apparently, it's like, Beyonce. It's just Nelly. Once the design was approved by Louvre, 42 artists sculpted each panel. Take a close look at the paneling, and then you look at the large table created by Duguier and Ramion, and they use the same motif. So on the middle of on the table is the same motif you find in the wall. And so we don't know which came first. It's, was it chicken or the egg? We don't know which came first, but I kind of love the fact that the desk or the table matches the same thing on the wall. When you enter the room, you see this gorgeous green marble heater. That was done by Rene Langlois. It perfectly matches the green damask velvet chairs. In these rooms, while the furniture will be original for most of the rooms, the fabric is not. Most of the fabric was done in the 60s or 70s, the 1960s or 70s, so 100 years later. All those people sitting on them, they're not going to hold up that long. But the ceiling itself is also covered with more wax walnut with egg borders and huge rosettes. And then it's crowned in the center with a brown monochromatic painting of the allegories of the arts by Victor Francois Bionnery. He also painted the ceiling for the Empress's room of the Tuileries. And what I love about coming in here is that you really get an idea of what the Tuileries look like, because so many of the same people and artists that worked on them also had done stuff in the Tuileries for Empress Eugenie and Napoleon III. So while they didn't ever live in these rooms, we kind of get an idea of what it looked like in the Tuileries. Then you sort of step into the first of the gold and red rooms, and you get to see your first of chandeliers. The first thing you notice are the two huge chandeliers with more than 80 bulbs there. But this one, I love it when I see people go in there, and if they say something, I'm like, oh, wait, they get better. So you see those and everybody's like, wow. And I'm like, oh no, it's going to get better. But this one, these are really gorgeous. And then what appears to be stone sculptures on the wall is, again, the carton pierre. Carton pierre is basically, here's another thing I was looking up how to make. Carton pierre is made with boiled tissue paper, which just sounds kind of gross to me, clay, chalk, and then this is the other one, animal skin glue.
It's wild what they could do.
Yeah, kind of like, it's crazy that they do that. Much lighter on the walls than stucco. It's less expensive, and carton pierre can also be found at Versailles. I was shocked about that one, but you would never really know. I mean, I don't think you would know unless you took a hammer to it. It was sculpted by Joseph Felix Simillard and Bernard. They did much of the walls and the hangings throughout all the ceremonial rooms. Another really cool thing about this one, when you talk about matchy, the carpet reflects the ceiling. So on the ceiling, you have two big rosettes, and then in the middle, kind of a big rectangle frame. And then the original carpets were done by Brocquier, and it's the exact copy of that original, but it reflects what is on the ceiling.
That is cool. It makes you want to go back and see it ASAP.
I know, you gotta go. I'll take you in there. But Charles Daubigny also painted two huge paintings in this area too. One is of herons and the other is stags. And so they're all, he put, when he does these paintings and all the ones he does, it's probably like 50% of it is trees. And these are pretty good size ones. This normally you when they use these rooms, you'd walk in from one side to the other, but you don't get to do that. There's stanchions that kind of keep you from going all the way in. But you then walk into another one of the subdued rooms. It's the last room of the private apartments. It served as the bedroom for the minister's wife. It included a small dressing room that was later removed. And if you look up at the ceiling, you kind of see when you first walk in, the dressing room portion of it was very small. I mean, it's not even like, there's no woman that would say that's a good enough closet. But the ceiling here was again painted by Alexis de Guéquier. It has garlands of flowers, and then heads of goddesses in the corners, and then in the middle of each of the walls on the ceiling, it then has a different vase representing the seasons of the year. So one side is like the flowers of the spring, one's the flowers of the fall, etc. It has that same lovely fabric of the bouquets of flowers on there. And like I said, most of that fabric dates to the 1970s. But these rooms, what's really cool about these first few rooms up until you get to here, they've got these huge banners hanging, and these banners are in English, Spanish, and French. And they have the bunch of information about the restoration process and kind of showing about the one that they did in like 2012 and then the one that they just recently did. And it's really interesting. Like, take some time to look at those or take pictures of it, and read it later on, but it's kind of interesting. The next one is kind of where it's kind of goes in between being part of the private apartments and part of the ceremonial rooms, but it's the family living room that they've used for smaller formal events. Most of this room is filled with original furniture, except for these beautiful tapestry queen chairs by Louis Denois. They date to 1763, so they're probably the oldest thing in all these rooms. That's images in that were done in tapestry, but of Francois Boucher's paintings. It's a bit more of the style of Versailles. The ceiling, again, you have another great ceiling by Emily Levy. It's in the center is stars and the elements, again in very monochromatic. I don't know, there was a big thing about monochromatic paint in these rooms. And then Apollo, represents the sun, and he's with a chariot pulled by horses. And then on the other side is Diane, and she represents the moon, and she has cupids in the center. Around the ceiling in the little vaults are 4 medallions representing each of the elements. So in the north, the earth, south, water, east is fire, and west is air. And those are really, again, in this very blue monochromatic colors. This is the only room in all the apartments that has framed art on the wall. In 1993, as I said, the contents were given to the Louvre. And so they've actually added a few more in there after the restoration. So there's 10 paintings in there now. Before there were 6. But the one above the door when you come in is really beautiful. It's a vase of flowers by Elise Brouillet. It's really a beautiful one. And then on the east wall, there is a really neat one that is called, it's The View of Nice, and it's by a gentleman named Adolphe Viollet-le-Duc. And Viollet-le-Duc, you should know as the other mastermind behind the Notre Dame restoration of the 19th century. And Adolphe was his son. And I love
the family.
all in the family. So then you go into the big room, and this is the room where your jaw will drop. This is the room that as soon as you enter, you cannot miss the chandelier of 180 bulbs.
What?
And it's gorgeous. And I read one time that it was Baccarat, but I've never read that since. And I've never read that in any official Louvre publication. So I'm going to have to say it most likely is not, but who cares? It's absolutely stunning. When they cleaned all of these, that I can't even imagine how heavy that is, because it has 180 bulbs, and then it probably has like, I don't know, 600 crystals on it, that then 600 hanging down bunches. It has got to be massively heavy. It could be lowered from the ceiling to be cleaned. The other chandeliers in the rooms have 60 bulbs. The wall sconces have 25, and then there's the torchères, which are the big tall ones in the corners, and those have 12. So somebody actually asked me, I did a video of this whole room that I mentioned that was on YouTube, and somebody asked me in the question as we were doing it, they said, are those rooms really hot because of the light bulbs? And those rooms always get very hot. But then I was like, maybe that's why, because I should go in there and count, because I know how many each one has, depending on what design, how many light bulbs. There's got to be over 1,000 light bulbs in those rooms.
Yeah, that makes sense. It would heat up the whole room.
Yeah, because they don't look like the LED kind of ones that gives off that really weird blue light. They actually, when they restored all this and cleaned it, they actually changed the lighting scheme a little and made the light warmer. So I don't know, maybe LED, is that what they're called? LED lights could give off more of that. I've always known them as being those really or horrible bluish colors.
Yeah, it's possible. I have to go check out the new lighting.
Yeah, yeah, it just every and it didn't before the fabric and on like the tables, even if the tables had like a quarter-inch piece of glass on top of it, you could like carve your name in the dust. It was so thick and dirty in those rooms. And I was like, I get it on the fabric. You're not taking a dust buster to it on these chairs that are, but they're now we know that they're only like 50 years old, the fabric, but but now when you didn't notice it in the chandelier until now when you see them cleaned and you're like, holy bananas, those things are amazing.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it since it's been cleaned. I can't believe how long it's taken.
Yeah, 9 months. But thankfully, this is another upside of the Olympics. We got all these things cleaned and redone, opened.
Yeah, exactly. We're cleaning everything up.
So also in this area is when you look up on the wall. And so you're just going to basically want to spend all your time looking up onto the wall. Is in the corners, there's medallions. There's two medallions in each corner, kind of oval ones. And these were done by Victor Binier. And he also did some in another part of the Louvre, which we'll do a whole thing about later on in the year. But these also represent the art. So one corner's architecture, that is in the northwest corner, and in between those there's like a little cupid, and then above that is different pieces like representing that, so there's like levels and rulers and things like that. There's also in the southwest corner, it's sculpture. So there's the two medallions representing sculpture, and then there's the Belvedere torso. In the southeast corner, it represents art, and in the middle of it is a on what basically looks like they carved it out of a medallion, is of Raphael. And then in the northeast corner, it's music. But the ceiling, and then the three semicircles are what is pretty amazing. So the ceiling was done by Charles Raphael Marichal. And we told you last week how they could not use, like, you don't have Delacroix or Ingres or any of these guys that were really known for doing a lot of these big murals. Because the state was paying for this, they had to use basically kind of more unknown artists. So Charles Raphael Marichal, he had done something for Lufia and for Napoleon III at Fontainebleau, but that was it. So he was born in 1825 in Metz. He was the son of a glass painter. He first did a sketch of this painting. It's massive on the ceiling, including both Napoleons, Bonaparte and the Third, surrounded by great men of their time. Kind of like a lot what you see in the Salle d'Enon, which we'll tell you about someday. He was assisted by another gentleman, Louis Doreau. It was a glue-based composition. So majority of the painting was done in Metz and then sent in pieces to Doreau in Paris, and they glued it to the ceiling, which I'm sure that is not a good thing. But what it appears now is in the lower center, you have Napoleon III and Eugenie that are sitting on thrones. They welcome, coming up from the right, the administrators of fine arts and mechanical arts. They're presenting the plan of the Louvre and the model of their Turgot pavilion, which is right where you're standing if you're in this room. The painting is presented, and they're holding a palette, architectural level. Statuary has a mallet and a chisel, and mechanical arts by young boys carrying forging hammers and tools. In the right corner, you have Neptune with a trident and Mars wearing a helmet and a spear, and he's overcoming a woman with a crown that's called a couronne murale. And basically that's anytime, and you'll see this in Paris all the time. You'll see a woman and she's wearing a crown, but it looks like, kind of like a wall. Those are emblematic of a city. So this one, it was the emblem of Sevastopol, which in September 8th, 1855, Napoleon III consolidated into his imperial regime. So that's why that's there. You have in the left corner is parts of the world representing Europe, Africa, India, and China, because it's the Universal Exhibition, bringing things from their industry. And then you also have Minerva and Mars, and though they are representing power and force, two of the things about the king, two of his, virtues. Up at the very top of it, You also have all these little genies that are holding, like one's holding Notre Dame and one Val de Grace and one the Madeleine. They were holding all of these buildings that Napoleon III had a role in, pretty much just restoring. He didn't build those. And then there's other angels that are holding these huge ribbons, and on these there's like 30 different battles written on. You cannot see this because when I looked, I was like, you can't see any of that. You can't see any of the writing, but it's a massive piece and it's really amazing. But my favorite are around the walls as well are the semicircles. There's on the south side it represents Catherine de Medicis, who we've talked about many times. She is sitting there, and there is a model of the Tuileries, the Palais de Tuileries. On the west side is Henry IV, and he's presenting the Bordelot, which we know as the Grand Gallery, but originally it was the Bordelot, and with Sully there. And then on the east is Francois Premier with the Salon Carré. And then on the north is supposed to be Louis XIV. And this is one of those things that's going to haunt me to my grave. There, because this is also the musician's balcony, you cannot see this. And so apparently it's back and it's rolled up, but the Louvre doesn't even have a picture of it in the inventory of what it looked like.
That's not fair.
No, and it makes me crazy. Like I'm literally going to have to get to the curator of the department, and I'm working on it just because I need to see it.
If anybody can get done, it's you.
I know I'm going to get to it. But one of the things that Louvre did when he was designing buildings and rooms, he kind of liked to do it where he could do a room that could change into something. So the Grand Salon can turn into a theater. So the next room is actually called the theater. But when you stand in there and you turn around, when you turn to go walk towards the other rooms, you see above you is the the musician's balcony. And then there's these beautiful giant red velvet curtains that come down. So they could build a little platform on one side of that. And so they could do a play or music. And then the Grand Salon, they could take all the furniture out and they could put 11 rows of chairs that would seat 265 people. So they did it so it's like the rooms could kind of be used for other things. But again, you have the carton pierre in this room. You have the caryatides and the atlas up there holding up things on the wall, figuratively. And then you have the Corinthian capitals with the N. Below all of these semicircle paintings are more sculpture details, including the god of music Apollo under the entrance of the door. But also notice where they'll have like little genies pulling back what looks like a tapestry, but it's all done in that carton pierre and then painted, and it's gorgeous. I will put pictures on my website. But I think my favorite thing I found in here when I realized this, and I actually had to tell somebody that I know that works pretty high up in the Louvre. I was talking to them about this and they didn't know about this. And I was freaking out. I was so excited about it. So when you are in that big room and you look and you see the fireplace with the mirror above it, look at the top of the mirror and there's the imperial insignia cartouche. It's surrounded by a laurel wreath and it's pierced with a sword. So you see the big N for Napoleon. But on either side of that at the top, in the very center, there is a crown, and it's the crown of Emperor Napoleon, but the third. But it's also the same as the one for Empress Eugenie. We don't have the one that was at the crown of Napoleon III anymore, but we do have the one of Empress Eugenie, and it's in the Louvre, and it's gorgeous. It has like over 2,000 diamonds in it. It's in the Galerie d'Appartements. So that's in the very center. And then on the left is the sculpture of the Hand of Justice. And on the right is the scepter of Charlemagne that dates to the 14th century. Those are two things that were also used for the coronation of Napoleon Bonaparte. And both of those things live in the Louvre. So you could go from seeing this here like that and walk not very far and see the two scepters in another room. And I freaked out. I loved it so much.
I mean, that whole place is just gorgeous. And if you guys haven't gone, you have to go.
It's so cool. And below that is on the mantle is a clock. And this clock was done by Charles Crozier. And it was done in 1840. And it used to be in the Palais des Tuileries, and somehow this clock survived the fire. There's two putis down below. Two putis are basically what we would call like little cupids, and they are holding up a portrait of Louis the 14th. It's kind of hard because you can't get very close to it, but I will put a picture of it so you can see it really clearly on my website. But as I said, you go through this opening, and on the left is a small drawing room that opens up onto the balcony of the Pavillon Turgot. And the ceiling is painted with the sky, but we can't really see it. The theater itself, the ceiling is dedicated to the Seasons of Flowers by Auguste Garon. And musicians with instruments, and then also in the vaults, and then the golden detailed background is stunning. So just stand and just look at every detail in these rooms. And on the walls of this room, you won't be able to miss two massive portraits. One on your left of Empress Napoleon III, and then the other wall of Empress Eugenie. These are not the original ones. The original ones were in the Tuileries. They were destroyed, but they made a copy of these long before the fire happened. They were copies of the Franz Xavier Winterhalter was the one who originally painted these paintings. And then they were copied by two different artists, and they're now there in these rooms. In these rooms with the chairs, all the chairs in these rooms are gorgeous. But you'll notice, and they used to be in the Grand Salon, now they've moved to the theater, this 3-seated chair. And so they're like little club chairs, and they're attached together. So there's 3. And so they're called the indiscreet. So basically you could be sitting there and like whispering into the ear of your friend.
Now those like the ones they put in the Palais Royal gardens too?
Kind of like that, but those are just 2s. So those are this basically, think of it as if there was a third one. So they're kind of all like going around, but exactly that kind of same thing.
I love the whisper chairs.
The whisper chairs, yeah. The next room you go is a small dining room. Again, here you have a bunch of imitation stuff. So it's an imitation Boulay marqueterie, which is the very dark black cabinets with the gold filigree on it. The wall itself is painted with a trompe l'oeil by C. Heron. It's a trellis, but he also added a heron bird in there because that's exactly the way his name is spelled. In there is his signature. And this room could be used to extend the large dining room, which is what you see next. The large dining room could seat 42 people. And then they have paintings of hunting scenes, which is a little morbid that, you're in there eating and there's pictures of vultures attacking a rabbit. But that was very Napoleon III. These are done by Louis Godfrey Jardin, and then the silver and gold plated metal was all done again by Charles Christophe. And that company, the Christophe Silver Company, is still in business today, which is pretty amazing. And then if you come around from there, there's a hallway, so you actually get another view into the dining room, so make sure to check that out. But there's a really cute little kind of spiral staircase right when you go through, and that was to go upstairs to their silver storage. But normally back then when they used these as offices, you'd go past there and there'd be more of the offices of the state and then later of finance. But they're gorgeous rooms, all beautifully restored now. And I think because it's they've been closed for so long, I've been going in there first thing in the morning. So I've had like an hour and a half to myself, just me and the guards. But even when I've gone a couple weeks ago later in the afternoon, there were still not that many people there. So some people might not know it's reopened.
Yeah, I think we need to make a public service announcement.
Yeah, or maybe just tell them not to. So only you guys know, and it's a secret and you could go visit it.
Okay, don't tell anybody.
But check out if you cannot get here sometime soon or whenever. If not, we'll put the link to the video so you can watch and see all of these amazing details in there. But you could also just take this with you and listen to it and walk through there.
And make sure you head over to ClaudineHemingway.com to book a tour and learn more. Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, ClaudineHemingway.com.